Hello, my name is Griffin Joseph, and I will be here today interviewing a native New Zealander, my grandmother Ruth Beaglehall. And yeah, is like I understand that you grew up in New Zealand. What would you think of as your favorite pastime or way to spend your leisure time as a child growing up?
Right, so that's a really good question. So when I grew up, I'm white. I'm called a Pakeha. I grew up in a middle-class family. So my childhood would have been very similar to yours.
Oh.
You know, riding bikes, playing with friends, going play dates, just very similar to you. Now, what's interesting about New Zealand is that New Zealand also has a population called the Maori, who are people of color, who came from Polynesia originally on canoes. And if you ask me about those children, I never met a Maori growing up because they mostly live in the rural area. They did then. Now they're moving into the cities. And those children would have had a very different life than I had.
Interesting. So just like the same culture, but kind of two different lifestyles.
Well, New Zealand is a bicultural society. It's two different cultures. Now, I told you when I grew up, I never knew a Maori and I never heard the Maori language. Now, since the 70s, there's been what's called a reparations movement, where the Maoris have rose up and said, look, you took away our land, you took away our rivers, you took away our mountains, you white people took over our land. And so now they have been claiming back and actually getting money from the government and having their lands restored to them. So if I grew up in New Zealand now, I would be learning Maori, like my nephews have learned Maori. I would be learning more about my history as a Maori. I would learn more about Maori people's history. So the particular time I grew up, which is quite a long time ago, in the 40s, late 40s, was very different from what it was now.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, and I also assumed that you went to school as a child in New Zealand.
I did.
What would be the differences between the school that you went to and maybe the school that I go to now?
Well, when I went to, for instance, the elementary school probably would have been really similar. But when we got to be high school, we didn't have middle school, so we stayed through Standard 6, it was called, till we were about 12, about your age. Then we'd go to high school, and the girls would go to the girls' high school, and the boys would go to the boys' high school. So it was girls went to one school, boys went to a segregated school. When I was growing up in my early 20s, schools became more integrated with both sexes. But when I grew up, I went to a all-girls public school. It was a public school.
And so now would it be different? Now would it be less desegregated?
Yes, most of the high schools now have girls and boys together in the school.
A lot can change over time, huh?
A lot can change over time. And most of the children, if you're brought up in a Maori family, you have a choice in elementary school to go to a Maori immersion program where everything you're learning is in Maori and in Maori culture. Once you get into high school, though, you could continue to take Maori, but you would be studying in English.
Interesting. And and I understand you've also been in New Zealand many times. What would be your favorite spot in all of New Zealand and why?
Well, that is also an interesting question. Because, I grew up in Wellington. Wellington's the capital city, right? And I remember that my parents took our family, we went camping. We went camping one time in the South Island. And when I was 16, I went on a high school girls trip to the glaciers in the South Island. Now, why I'm telling you that, when I meet people who say, who love New Zealand, most of what tourists go to see in New Zealand, I've never been a tourist in my country. I don't know most of New Zealand. So my favorite spot would be my hometown, which is very hilly, and I love walking the hills. And now I go to a place where my sister lives, which is by the beach on the west coast, and I love small town on the west coast called Raglan. But I really haven't, I don't know my country.
Yeah.
That would be like if you lived in California all your life and you just stayed in Los Angeles. And
Yeah,
somebody started talking about the redwoods or, what else do we have? Redwoods.
So you would just...
You wouldn't say, well, I never saw the redwoods.
Yeah.
And I haven't really seen most of my country. So one day, before I die, I'm going to be a tourist. And I'm going to go travel around my country and get to know it.
So yeah, you more enjoyed the natural beauty of just your small little town in the forests and stuff.
Yeah, well, by the beach. New Zealand is an incredibly beautiful country. It's about the size of California. And it has glaciers and fjords and Alps in the South Island. And in the North Island, it has, beautiful islands and warmth. And I mean, it's just a beautiful country. It has a desert in the middle of the middle of the North Island.
Do you have any stories or exciting holidays growing, or major events? What would be like a big day that you could know?
Major event.
Like high school graduation or just would it be similar?
What would I consider a major event of my childhood? I remember traveling around the South Island in a station wagon with my family.
Oh, did you take school off for a year?
No, it was in the summer vacations, and I remember. You know what I remember about that? It was a major event because both my oldest sister and brother got so pissed off they left us. So I remember that. They weren't going to travel around the South Island with their little brother and sister. So I remember that, but that's not what you were asking.
Yeah.
So you're asking a major event. So we celebrated, I grew up in an atheist home, but we celebrated Christmas. It wasn't a Christian holiday, it was just the holiday we celebrated Easter. So I don't have any special big event memories. Now, it's different because now Makariki is the name of the Maori New Year. And now all the schools and all the children, they learn about Makariki and they celebrate Maori New Year. But that wasn't something that I never heard.
Like you said, in the 70s, the Maori kind of took back their land and their cultures. And
well, that was a big movement. Yeah, it was a big movement. It's still going on now.
And how do you think from the country today, today, would be different from the country you grew up in?
So that's another good question. When I grew up, the country was very provincial. Do you know what that means? Very narrow-minded. Beer, going to the pub, football, very, very closed-minded. It wasn't worldly. It was very. Now, because of all the world trade and the world movements have all come to New Zealand, so now the life is very different.
It's kind of opened up.
Very opened up and very now TPP, which is the big tax. New tax thing about the Pacific. There are people marching in the streets. Yeah. People are angry. So there's a lot of political action happening now, and that wasn't happening when I was growing up.
Just straight. Now it's kind of expanded and stuff.
Yeah, much more wider view of the world.
And can you run me through what would be a classic day for you in New Zealand?
Classic day. Griffiths probably wasn't very different than
exact same
classic
thing.
Day. Didn't want to get up in the morning, get yelled at, get up, gotta go to school, catch the bus, go to school. It was pretty much what you had.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was for me, as I told you, a white middle-class child, right?
It would have been different if you were a Maori child.
Yeah, so my Maori, I have nephews who've grown up and their first language is Maori and they identify as Maori. Their school, and they live by a beach. One of them went to a surfing high school.
That's pretty cool.
So they did surfing academies. One of my nephews now in high school is off to a great big barrier island for 5 weeks as part of his curriculum. So now many of the kids have the environment brought into their schooling. But you know what? They still have the same pressure. If they want to go to university, they got to study to go to university. When I was growing up, free education, free college education, not anymore. So, there's a lot of the same stresses and there are things that are different. Oh, little kids, and if you live in the country, they don't wear shoes to school.
Just
No shoes.
walk barefoot.
Everybody walks barefoot. Yeah.
All right, and do you have any other interesting or awesome facts that you could say about New Zealand?
New Zealand is a country of sheep.
Yeah.
60 million sheep. Sheep.
Yeah, I read about that. I heard that
Way
there are 9 sheep for every person in
Oh,
New
really?
Zealand.
It just seems like there's sheep everywhere. So it's very much a rural farming country. You know, it's
Yeah.
about farming, and farmers are in trouble right now. So that's a big part of the economy that's really tanking in New Zealand. But so no, I think the big facts are around sheep. Oh, the other thing that's an interesting thing is that the sheep and cows pooping in the rivers, and now there's a lot of, one of your cousins is working really hard about cleaning up the rivers. So these are a lot of environmental stuff
Yeah.
going on. Yeah.
I saw that they're like 3% of the population in New Zealand, including animals. 3% is human.
Really? So you probably know more facts.
Yeah, I probably know more tidbits about New Zealand. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Remember when you visited New
Yeah.
Zealand? Yeah, chopping
I hope to
firewood.
go
remember that?
again.
Yeah, I remember that.